Yeah, in those days, either you went on to college or you got drafted, or you joined. You know, some of the guys joined to get whatever they want. I decided to take my chances and not get drafted, but I got drafted. 19 and a half years old. Just bought a brand new Mustang. That's the way it works out.
Very concerned that I might get drafted. I'm not sure I was going. I know I couldn't control that, but I did attempt to join the reserves, and unfortunately, that didn't happen. Reserves at that time would need a physical, and I had already taken a physical, a draft physical. So they said I was all set to go, but so what they did is they contacted the local draft board for the physical, and she had a habit of, if she saw that you were going to go on the reserves, she would put you on the list, and that's how I got drafted. So instead of going to the reserves, I ended up getting drafted into the Army.
I gained an ROTC commission from Cornell University, and I deferred for 3 years to try and do a master's program. And so I entered the service in 1965, even though I was commissioned in 1963.
I was in high school and graduated in 1963. And you know the dates and the timings of that war and what have you, so I was not overly concerned about the war at that time. We had a presence there, of course, at that time. But for me, I did graduate from Wareham High School, and I thought I wanted to be a petroleum engineer, but after 3 years, I decided that I didn't think I wanted to be a petroleum engineer. And at that point, that's when they were pulling numbers and what have you, because they needed people in the now. So, as opposed to just dropping out at that moment in time and being drafted, I was really feeling very much that I wanted to become involved with medicine. So I joined the Navy and signed up to be a medical corpsman.
I was home. I was at home when I received it, and my wife and I were very serious about our relationship, and we'd hoped to get married. So, I mean, 1,000 things went through my head about what would happen, how could I, what could I do about it, and we finally came to the realization there was nothing I could do about it, so we had to accept it.
So that morning was very terrible, to get up for breakfast, say goodbye to my 1.5-year-old daughter and my wife who was pregnant, and say, you know, I'll see you in a year. That was the toughest experience of all.
Oh, my heart sank, because in those days, you know, to go to Vietnam is like a death sentence, you know. You don't know if you're going to make it or not, and you're leaving home, and to me, it was the first time I've left home for any length of time, so it was a little scary. I do remember the date that I got drafted, September 4th, 1969. And do remember the date that I left Vietnam, April 6, 1971. Those are burnt into my memory.
When I left, the day I left, my father said to me, he said, I know you're not overly religious, but take this with you. I think it'll help keep you safe. And we're Portuguese, so this is a thing called the Medida de São Cristo. Medida de São Cristo is a statue, a very famous statue in the Azores of that literally means Mr. Saint Jesus, and it's a famous statue that's so revered that miracles associated with it. But so this is actually the length of the statue. And that's what that means. So he said, I don't care what you do, whether you're religious or not, just keep it with you. So you can see it's kind of soiled, but it's 50 years old, and was my wallet, and went through a lot of things, and got me home safe. And I have to say that my father prayed for me in front of that statue every single day I was there. So this means a lot to me.
Arrive in Da Nang, get handed my piece, introduced to my platoon/company, and right to Elephant Valley the next day, where there was quite a severe amount of fighting going on. 1968, There were more men lost in 1968 than in any other year. And God bless all those others that were lost at different times. But jumped out of the helicopter, hit the deck, rolled over, and I rolled up against a guy I was at Marriott College with. Big, tall elephant grass in the middle of a firefight. He was a great guy.
It was an experience. We went to Fort Dix, and my group was the last group to go into the old barracks. The World War II barracks were up on stilts and everything. And an experience. As soon as that bus stops and the drill instructor jumps on the bus and starts yelling and screaming at you to get off the, you know what, bus and this and that. I said, oh my God. And within 10 minutes you realize you don't call a drill instructor, an enlisted man, sir. No, they're drill instructors. You learn very fast, and if you don't learn, you pay the penalty. You'll be doing push-ups or doing something.
My first experience was being assigned as company commander to this unit, and the first week the VC blew up an ammo dump about a mile away. Now, an ammo dump there was probably a square mile with boxes and boxes and boxes of munitions. And when they blew it up, the whole place went up at once. So within a mile away, we were getting mortar fire from our own ammo dump. The mortars were firing everywhere.
When they would get their weapons or their rifles, they had to zero me in. So there was an area out there where they had that. So I guess they didn't know what to do with me at the time. So they said, go down to that area and all the shell casings that are going to pick those shell cases off the ground. So I did. I started picking them off the ground, and suddenly I realized I was being shot at. And it was my first experience. I didn't have a rifle. I didn't have anything, and I couldn't believe I'm being shot at. I got no way to defend. I have no idea where it's coming from. So I remembered what they said, stay low and keep those arms going and come back to where you could come back to. So I got back, and once I got back, and there was a sergeant there. I said, I was just being shot at. And he says, yeah. I says, yeah, there's a sniper out in that wood line out there, and every once in a while he takes shots at us. And once I realized that, I said, well, I'm not home anymore. I am not home anymore.
There was very little battles where you could see your enemy. It's basically shooting back and forth in the jungle, just shooting from people shooting you from over there, then you shoot back from over there. You know, it was a guerrilla warfare, really. The cadre, the ones that trained us, were just back from Vietnam. And they were very hard on us. All we heard was, you're gonna die, you're gonna die, you're gonna die. And what they were trying to do is train us the best as possible so we wouldn't get killed. You know, what you learn in books and in real life is two different things, you know? Yeah. You start listening to what you're told to do. And like I said, these guys just came back from Vietnam, and they knew the little ins and outs and what to expect.
I thought I was sort of avoiding things, and didn't feel like I didn't know if I really wanted to come home and say that I'd been a clerk that whole time, and I don't know how that would sound. And you have to remember, the Vietnam War was so controversial. So no matter what we did, even if we were clerks, we were thought to be baby killers or whatever. So nothing sounded good. So my sense of guilt already started there, if you will. So then I told Mr. Schmick, I said, you know what? I said, I think I want to do something else. And he said, yeah. He said, I'm just getting ready to promote you anyway, but I can't promote you as a clerk. I can promote you as a mechanic, because that's what the other people did. They said, well, if you promote me as a mechanic when I come back home, they're going to think I'm a mechanic. So I said, I really need to do something different. So he said, if you can get somebody to replace you, then then go ahead, and then you can become a mechanic. So I did that, and I thought maybe that'd give me a better sense of what I was doing, and felt good, a little bit better about myself. It really didn't, but what it did is it put me in more arm's way, because you have to repair things. They have to get them out to the field, whether that's repaired in the field, whether that's repaired there, wherever it was. If they needed the equipment, it had to be delivered. So so we worked tremendous hours just trying to get the equipment out. I mean, we're thinking about protecting our own people. So that sense of responsibility at that point sat well with me. So I thought that was important.
You learn to depend on your buddy, because they have to depend on you, you have to depend on them, and you get very, very close. And you know, especially in infantry, and a lot of guys lost their buddies and stuff, and it really, really rough. I lost a couple people in artillery, my captain and my forward observer, and it hurts you, especially like my captain. He had just gotten a letter from his wife. His baby girl had been born. Oh, he was so happy and everything, and overjoyed, and he was like a little kid. And I got transferred from that unit to another unit, and then I got a letter from my best buddy that I was with saying that Captain Heinbold got killed. So what you think about is, you know, there's a little girl that doesn't have a father anymore.
How come we were the lucky ones?
Every single story would be different. Every single story would be different.
The main thing was to protect my men. I mean, really, as an officer, that's what you do. You take care of your men.
I wasn't there at the time. I went on R&R to Hong Kong. When I came back, I found out that the infantry had heard movement, so they called in artillery. And next morning they found a dead bear. They could hear movement. There was a bear out there. And that's why we include a lot of the animals and snakes and stuff in our slides, because a lot of people don't realize how many other things are out there besides the enemy, you know? Tigers and leopards and elephants and snakes and insects. You wouldn't believe it. The weather's going to kill me. The enemy's not going to kill me. The weather's going to kill me. And then the smell of the country. It's, you know, there's no running water unless you're in some fancy place in Saigon where it's really built up, but no running water. So, you know, all you smell is feces and urine and rotten food and everything. But after about a week, you get used to it. You think nothing of it. You get used to it. You have no choice.
The worst was the humidity, the dampness. Nothing ever dried out. You always felt like you were sleeping on a sponge.
My wife described how many times things would happen where she knew where I was, and there'd been a lot of people killed. Was I one of them? I remember telling me that one time she was leaving for work, and it was told it was an area and I was in. They had bombed. They bombed her. By the time she got to work, she was throwing up. She was just an absolute mess. So sometimes people forget there are families back home who at some level are dealing with the same thing you are. So I think it's important to keep that in mind.
It's overwhelming. You come from the boondocks for a year, and then all of a sudden you're home. I met my second child, who was 10 months old, who I'd never seen before. She had a small apartment in Flushing. When I was in Vietnam, I was stationed next to what they call a artillery unit. So all night long you'd hear boom, 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 and all of a sudden I'm home and I'm sleeping in my baby's room, and all I hear is her breathing.
Well, when I came home, I was in so many ways I was a different person, because I came home and I was not the same person that I was. I sort of had an attitude. I said, you know, I've been at war. I've seen this and been through that. So, you know, I think I have a right to do pretty much whatever I want to do. And so at that point, believe me, I was not a very good person, and at times not a very good husband, and so I had a lot of regrets about that. And there were things I never dealt with. There were things that I talked about here, that I wrote about, that my wife never knew, nobody ever knew that I experienced. And so that's when I realized that as I sort of was dealing with this more and more, that I was developing this PTSD.
Noises, booms. In fact, when my kids were growing up, they thought it was funny when they dropped something and Dad jumped and started heading to the ground. And finally my wife says, "Don't do it anymore." And they finally realized I'd gotten married. We're going on our honeymoon. We drove all the way up to Maine, a long drive. So we found a motel. It was the middle of the afternoon. So I just plopped on a bed because I was tired of driving and everything. A storm came over, and the lightning going through the air. I jumped off the bed yelling, "Incoming!" It's funny now, but it wasn't so funny then. And any little noise, smell, it brings me back there.
And it so broke America, you know. So many people against, so many people for, so many people dedicated to it, so many lives lost. I mean, 60,000. It's unheard of. It's ridiculous. If you think about it, it's the whole population of this city, Fairhaven, Mattapoisett, Marion. I mean, every person dead. It's just catastrophic.
It was the biggest experience I had in my life. I learned that you can get really close to somebody in a very short period of time. I learned what soldiers do when they go off to war. And I think it made me a better person. It made me more aware of how great this country is and how much we can do, what opportunities we have, where other countries, they don't have any opportunities, you know?
You need to protect your country and your people. The police can't just do it all. When it gets really bad, what do? We call in the National Guard, or we call in the Army, or right here on our own grounds. I think there's a lot to be said for serving your country. And we obviously need that type of service.
Now what I take about this is that I know there are so many Vietnam veterans, or any veteran, it doesn't really matter. When they come back home, it's very difficult for them. It's not hard for them, it's not easy for them to associate with other people and what they come back to, as much as we all try.
I hope people support the kids who are now getting deployed over and over and over again. It's so wrong.
I just hope that if other veterans have a chance to express themselves in the way I did, hopefully it'll be helpful, because it certainly helped me.